Warning, this is part 2 of our interview with Steve. If you wish to hear part 1, it will be in the description. But also, you don't really need to enjoy this episode.
And now, back to Dungeons and Dragons.
Can you describe Kevin the Goblin really quick? I think he's my favorite character you've made. I love him very much.
Yes, I can. So Kevin the Goblin is a goblin who was raised in like a traditional goblin environment, and during some sort of a raid or some sort of attack on his goblin city, he was saved by like a human ranger or some sort of a human hero whose name he thought was Kevin, and that was the moment that he decided he wanted to break out and become an adventurer. So he renamed himself Kevin in honor of the dude that saved him. And he, not realizing necessarily that the world outside is maybe a little less kind to goblins, he's decided that he's gonna try to do the heroic thing and go out as a solo goblin and meet up with a crew and try to save the world and help people. But he's a swarm keeper ranger, so he has mastery over specifically beetles and bugs that he collects and keeps in his pockets and stuff. So part of my plan with that character was mainly I didn't necessarily dig too deep into a full backstory. I want to customize it to whatever game he gets to play in, but the idea that he's just so unaccustomed to what the normal idea of a hero is, and it's all these people in shining armor and powerful mages, and he's like, I have beetles in my pockets. Sick the beetles on them.
That's why I love him. I love his little coat full of beetles.
And he's just trying to do in his head what he thinks a real hero would do in this moment. That's all. He's no real idea of what is actually happening. He just ends up in whatever game that he's in. He ends up in this circumstance where he's I have to fake it till I make it. I want to be the dude that saved me, and there's a good chance that the guy that saved him wasn't even actually named Kevin and wasn't even actually a hero. He just misunderstood, or maybe even made it up. I don't know.
Maybe he wasn't even saving him.
Yeah.
Maybe Kevin was mistaken.
So that's my plan for Kevin, and my goal was partially to try to make how do you make a character that's relatively obnoxious super endearing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's a hard tone to strike, because you don't just want to be the dude that's on all the time, that's cranked to 11, look how wacky I am, Yeah. It's old pretty quick. Kevin has nuance. He has layers. He's a very complex character.
So I also, on the context of Kevin, the reason why I want to ask you, when you create, I guess, characters that you play, where do you start? What is your player character creation process? I know you said with some NPCs it's a joke name, and even with player characters, but what do you draw on when you create characters that you play?
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you this earlier actually, so I'll flip this on you in a second. But for me, it kind of just comes down to preference and honestly what sounds fun at the moment. There will be times like with the character Giuseppe Crenando, my
love Giuseppe.
He's a little warforged. I got the idea one day because I knew that we were doing a one-shot campaign with you, and I had a little bit of time to prep. And honestly, for me, it kind of starts with just looking at what my options are, looking at the different races, and by looking at them, I just get ideas based around I guess, my own personal preferences. So the Warforged sound cool, because I was like, okay, I could be like a robot, but like, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I really don't want to be a robot. And that somehow, I think I was watching Pinocchio, like the Guillermo del Toro one, and that's how the idea of making him like a marionette came about. I was like, what if he's just like a little army puppet? Because they're Warforged, they're made for war, but he's just like the little entertainer for the soldiers off on the side because he's a little puppet.
And it's like incredibly disarming to be like, hey, look at that puppet, and then the puppet is like attacking you.
Yeah, and then
unsettling.
And then, like, with that, just the idea of him being voiced by Danny DeVito came to mind because I was watching Always Sunny and I was like, Danny DeVito would be perfect for this. So it pretty much just became Frank from Always Sunny, honestly. That's kind of how his whole thing came about, is he's pretty much just Frank from Always Sunny, but trapped in a little puppet body.
That's awesome.
Of his own making, I guess. I don't know.
That's funny.
What about you? How do you come up with characters?
So it's like 50-50. Half of the characters that I come up with are kind of a similar process. Like I come up with a cool idea that's based on like a particular race or class or a combo of them, or I come up with like an idea for a backstory and then kind of build it out from there. What would be the best race class for this? What do I want to play that sounds interesting?
Yeah.
The other half the time, they're like super loosely based on people that I know in real life.
Really?
Yeah. So Kevin the Goblin is based on my college roommate, Kevin.
Really?
Yeah.
He's real. He's like that.
No, so Kevin was a great guy. He looked like a young Peter Griffin. He was from Boston, and he kind of sounded like a young Peter Griffin.
Did he have the glasses?
He did not have the glasses, though. He did.
Oh my god.
He was one of he grew up in Boston, and he came to Arizona because I went to ASU. He came to ASU as the idea that like, this is gonna be a party school. I'm gonna party so much, like this is gonna change my life. I'm gonna be this crazy partier. I'm gonna meet all these people. And then he proceeded to not do any of those things. But he had this obsession with like, I want everybody to think I'm cool. So I'm gonna do if somebody thinks something's cool, I'm gonna do it to show them how cool I am.
Just kind of the antithesis of being cool.
Yes. But that is honestly how the idea of Kevin the Goblin started, where it was just this obnoxious voice of like, Kevin is cool. Kevin, everybody knows Kevin is cool. And it just spun out from there of like this, based on my college roommate, of this goblin that just wants people to think that he's cool and that he's this hero, but in reality it comes across as like super difficult to handle because you're like, please stop doing these things because you're making life difficult for the rest of us, and you're turning people off like by trying to be cool all the time, trying to be on all the time. Nobody in this room wants to hang out with you. So
Kevin the Goblin is based off of a like tragic young Peter Griffin Beavis person that you knew.
Yes.
My God.
And Donk was based off of a guy that I went to high school with, who was I think he was the quarterback of the high school football team.
Oh, really?
And he was such a nice guy. He was and like, I feel bad saying it this way, but like, he was the like archetype, just big, nice idiot. He was so nice, he was so kind, he would do anything to help anyone, but he was not smart or bright, and
not traditionally smart, in many ways.
Yeah, not traditionally smart. He did not do well in school, and there were like running jokes sometimes in school where, and I wasn't in class. I was in some classes with him, but like, I remember hearing stories about in like some of the math classes in school where he'd get up to solve a problem on the board, or they'd be doing like work, and he'd be like, I know the answer, and across the room somebody would be like, what are you gonna do, throw a football at it? Like,
Poor guy.
But he's
so nice.
He was always like, despite that, he was always such like a good, nice guy.
That's good.
And that's where the idea for Donk came out of, where it was like, I wanted to create a character like that, where he was always nice, he was always kind, and he was almost like, in the context of D&D mechanics, his intelligence was low enough that he literally did not realize when people were being like mean to him or making fun of him, but big picture he knew like, this is a thing in the world that is bad and I don't like it. But like, if people were making fun of him, he'd be like, okay, sure, whatever.
And it wouldn't immediately click.
Would not affect him at all.
Or maybe he knows and he just takes it in his stride.
So that was where the idea for Donk came from, and then like in the campaign that I'm running for you guys, the guy that is currently missing, the professor from the Magical Academy that Tobias just told you about, Stannis, that he was built after my dad. So like, I had the image of my dad in my head when I created this like hobgoblin with a mustache.
Oh, he's a hobgoblin?
He's a hobgoblin.
Sweet, yeah. I've seen a picture of your dad. I can picture that.
Yeah.
Like a hobgoblin with a mustache.
Yeah, hobgoblin with like a belly and a mustache.
And the glasses.
Yeah,
sweet.
So that was the idea that I had when I created Stannis. So like, honestly, like half of the characters that I come up with are somehow loosely based on like a person that I knew in real life, because it's just an easy thing to like tap into.
That's interesting to hear that like so many of yours are kind of based on like real life people. For me, I watch way too many shows and I have way too many niche little interests and little series and books and whatever. I read a lot. I watch a lot of stuff. I consume many different things from all around, and that's kind of what feeds into my ideas. That's what'll give me the idea of like a marionette or like kickflip. I don't even remember how kickflip came about. I'm gonna be honest. I was looking at the gnome and the little pointy hat sounded funny. It's interesting to hear that yours are kind of based on real people. Should base more characters on real people, I think. Just need to talk to more people in real life, probably.
Hey, look! A Dungeons and Dragons ride! Wow, neat!
Give me a break.
I was gonna ask you, while we're kind of on the player topic, are we like a hard bunch to handle?
No, I don't think you are.
Are we crazy?
A little, but it's not. I don't think you guys are crazy in a way that makes it difficult. You're crazy in a way that makes it fun to run a game for.
Oh, that's good. I'm gonna say the pussers probably doesn't help.
Well, no, I mean, I think it helps a little bit, because you guys, there's just there are a lot of times, and I think this is going to happen regardless of who you're playing with, there are a lot of times where I'm trying to figure out what direction you guys are going to go and what options we have. So I'll loosely sort of sketch out a bunch of possible options so that I know that when you guys do a thing, I'll at least have a starting point. And then you guys will do a thing and I'm like, well, that was not on the list of things that I thought you guys were going to do.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of unpredictability in terms of planning, which helps because our sessions aren't, in the grand scheme of things, they're not that long. I mean, when we play for usually somewhere in the average hour and a half to 2 hour range.
Yeah.
So it gives me a lot of time to, when we're done, I can just be like, okay, we've only played for 2 hours. I didn't have to improv or off the cuff too much, and I can take what we've already done and I can build into a new thing that I absolutely was not prepared for.
Yeah. There's times. I know I've asked you about it before, but there's times I can't tell if it's a thing you pre-planned or a thing you like had to improv on the spot.
Like, so
you're very good at just like coming up with little scenarios that you didn't plan for, and you feel like it was part of the plan.
So do you have are there any specific like examples or anything you can think of that you...
I'm like, and not from our campaign, but I'm thinking of, in my campaign, 2 of the characters were escaping from police officers, and they're like, we want to go in the sewers. It's like, okay. And I had to real quick make up like a sewer scenario, and then I put like 2 little flumps in there because we had just done the flumps in our campaign.
I hate the flumps.
I love the flumps.
I hate them.
Why do you hate the flumps?
Because I don't know. In that particular context, when they appeared in our game because of the wild magic surge from Oriana, it was like the worst timing for me because it was in the middle of this like sort of serious-ish moment. It was this like it was the last challenge that you guys had from the Raven Queen to see if you were worthy, to see if you responded in the situation, and then in the middle of it, it was like, oh, magic jellyfish appear and just start attacking everyone around them, and I'm just like, I hate that this is a thing.
We're trying to have a serious conversation.
Yeah, I hate that this is a thing that I now have to pivot and plan for, and the like tone that I was going for immediately got flushed down the toilet, and I was like, whatever. All right, fine.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, which parts? What was a recent thing that you had to like improvise that was not planned?
So.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know whether or not I assume whether or not I can tell it was improvised or not.
So, and there are some things, and I don't want to. I'm trying not to like spoil things for the campaign going forward.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But there were some moments where it wasn't like explicitly planned, but it was stuff that I had been sort of kicking around in my head here and there as ideas, and then in the moment it was a thing that like made sense to put in and solidify. So for example, when you guys finish the attack, I guess the like attack on or finish your mission to the mill in town, when Stubbin sent you guys to the mill to protect the mill, and then you guys got ambushed, one of the attackers in the mill that was waiting to ambush you guys, being a guard that Ames knew, and having the tattoo that tied him to the raiding cult, that was stuff that I threw in as we were playing. Oh, really? Because my brain was like, this is going to make a lot of sense later.
Okay, I had no idea that dude was improvised.
Yeah.
All right, so well done.
But I realized after the fact, because I am hypercritical of myself and my DMing and my games.
Hey, me too.
And but it's a thing that like, as the DM, it's because I know all of the things all the time in this game, but when you're playing in somebody else's game, you don't know all the things all the time. So in that particular session, it was after I had added a bunch of this stuff in, and after it was, that it was a guard that Ames knew, and that he had this tattoo that was the same symbol as the cult that's like raiding the city, and the sort of the background plot line that the guard may have been for a while infiltrated by members of this cult planning this thing for quite some time. I'm like laying in bed that night after that game, and I was like, but Ames never mentioned to anyone that he recognized the guard until after this dude was dead. And I was like, well...
He was wearing a mask.
Shit.
He was wearing a hood. I don't know.
Yeah, so it was just, like little things like that I just kind of hyper-fixate on after the fact. But it just naturally happens when you're sort of building parts of the game as you go.
Sometimes, yeah, like sometimes it just goes like right over our heads. I have no idea. There's times there's little things like that. You could retcon that and just say he was wearing a little face cover before we killed him or something. I've retconned one or two little things that my players wouldn't notice, but that I would notice. Like, recently my players discovered these little wooden dolls, and I had said on the bottom there was like the letter H, which was like the family's like initial for like their last name or whatever, right? That like made them, and then I put the year in as like 1971, and then like going back and thinking about it, I'm like, that would not make sense because these are supposed to be made like at the time that like a family like has their first kid within the lore, and kid was supposed to be like 6 years old, and 1971's when everything went down, so I just like retconned it. Like next time I introduced it, I was like, you guys found a doll with the year 1965 written on the bottom.
Yeah.
Right over their heads. Nobody batted an eye. There's like little things like that.
Well,
have you ever retconned anything like major like that? Sorry, not to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say before I answer your question, I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah. In mine, like I didn't even address it. It was a thing where like nobody said anything about it. Because once the focus became on the tattoo and like, okay, well, how many other guards have similar tattoos? Is anybody aware of any other guards that might be involved in this? Like, who'd he hang out with? And it spun out into this whole separate conversation. That when we jumped into the next game, I was like, I don't even think I need to bring it up. I just not acknowledge the fact that like in my head, I considered it like a thing that I made a mistake on, but it ended up not having any sort of real impact. For the retconning question, there's not a lot that I think I've had to retcon. I think there's been some small stuff. I don't think it's necessarily significant, but I think it was in that area when we were sort of transitioning from doing a bunch of one-shots that we strung together into this like pseudo campaign into now we're doing like the full pre-written campaign. So a lot of the stuff that happened with Kepri and her backstory and the like Star Singer and the Shadowfell and the Star Singer being kidnapped by the Raven Queen, there were like little bits and pieces in there where I had to kind of retcon, and not in like an overt way, but just like small little changes that I had to make when you guys came back to that forest, and information about people and their histories, just because I was like, this needs, I wasn't planning on tying them together, and now that I am, this needs to make sense going forward. But it was stuff that it wasn't so significant that it had like a huge difference. It was just tiny little things for me that may have an impact like going forward.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had no idea, honestly. With like that, with like the whole mill thing, I just assumed like either like A, he was wearing like a face covering, or like B, it was dark, or C, like not really expecting to get ambushed by your own guy, and you're just like immediately getting attacked right off the bat. You're not gonna recognize him mid-combat,
Yeah.
Or a combination of all three, I don't know.
Well, and I think that's some of the benefit of not necessarily fully describing all the things, is there's a lot of gaps for you guys to like fill in my mistakes. And you guys are like, well, I saw it this way, and I'm like, yeah, that's what happened.
That's the one. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
I don't like this.
Whoa! What's happening?
Where are we?
Oh, I was gonna ask you. I had like two or three more little questions for you. All right. Do you plan campaigns in like broad story arcs, or is it very like moment to moment? I feel like I kind of know this answer.
So it's sort of a weird combination of both. I plan out, especially now because I'm running a heavily modified version of a pre-written campaign. I have the long, broad strokes planned out, and then the moment-to-moment stuff is as we play session to session, like that's the stuff that gets constantly shifted and adjusted. And I have a feeling that there are going to be points where we get in this pre-written campaign as written where you guys are absolutely going to do a thing that is not anticipated in the campaign, because it's sort of so one directional. It's so like pre-planned, like your characters are going to do A, and then once they're done with A, they're absolutely going to do B. And I'm reading this like there's no way my players are doing B. There's no way.
Yeah, and they do B.
Yeah, well, and then if you guys surprise me and do the thing, I'm like, well, it's already written. But I mainly do like big broad strokes, but they're not necessarily set in stone. It's very, or can be very shifting. So I have these long things planned out, and then I there's a lot of behind the scenes, moment to moment, like session to session planning is where most of the work goes in. And a lot of that is mainly to make sure that you guys have much more control in what you want to do than the adventure gives you.
Yeah.
So what do you do for yours? How do you plan it for yours?
I think it's kind of similar. I have like pretty broad story arcs planned, like relative, like end games for each character's little subplot. Minus like two of them. Two of them I still don't know what to do with. I was going to talk to you about that afterwards. But yeah, I think I'll have like the broadest of like story arcs is what I'll plan out first, which is in this case like the theoretical ending of the campaign, like what would be like the canonical ending, and then it's like breaking that into smaller and smaller chunks. So I know the ending that I would like to occur but might not occur, you know, and in the event that it doesn't, I have a contingency ending. There's like 2 or 3 little branching big arcs, and then within that there's like, here's the steps that need to happen to get to there, and then in between those steps is where you get little settings like Mobile, Alabama, where they're at now, which is like just a little stepping stone along the path, just an opportunity for them to level up or get cool stuff or to develop their characters. What's funny with the little steps is they'll develop their characters and they'll learn more about the world and they don't even know it. Mm-hmm. They don't even know that it's getting more fleshed out, but it is. I can already tell just from this is like the second setting they've gone to. I can already tell they're kind of more in tune with what their characters are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Like they're not just all murder hobos all the time, you know. Yeah, I think I'm kind of similar to you though. It's like broad strokes, and then kind of as they work their way along, I'll have little branching paths that kind of inform the story, and maybe I'll get to a point with one of those where there will be something that happens where I have to change the ending entirely, you know, or like the endings rather. I don't know. It's hard to plan something like that, especially when your players want to kill most of the NPCs you throw at them, or put key items up their ass. That's a rough one. Kill certain characters, or team up with certain characters you didn't think they were going to team up with, so now you have like a 5th party member. It's just kind of, you got to figure out what to do with him. And yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, and thankfully you guys in the game that we're in together, thankfully you guys are not like serious murder hobos, although Kepri does try to kill like half the people you guys run into. I think it's good having Kepri as the murder hobo and Thea as kind of like the occasional like murder hobo. I feel like she, like the rest of us, like if Kepri's like murdering people and we're like, oh yeah, this makes sense, like the rest of us will kind of jump in, you know. Mm-hmm. But I think it's good to have just one like murder hobo. Yeah, and she's not even a murder hobo at this point. She's very respectful of people's like spaces most of the time. She just doesn't really put up with bullshit. Yeah, and it's not a true murder hobo, but she is the one that is most prone to immediate violence. Yeah. But it's nice. It's nice playing with you guys in that context because of the fact that like I can plan out these characters and be like, hey, this NPC is going to have this information for you, and they're not immediately like gutted, and then I have to figure out, well then how do I get this information to you? Usually you guys let me get the information that's needed out first, and then you decide if you're going to kill them. If we're going to rip their spine out through the front of their body. Yeah. That was so cool that one time. that was pretty awesome. That was pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that we didn't murder Kale, although we thought we were going to murder Kale, but we didn't. He was like a 14-year-old. We decided not to, but we were very close. Yeah, you decided not to at the very last second. We almost killed that child. I don't think the Raven Queen would have been too happy with us if we just like murdered a street urchin child.
Yeah, probably not. But also, as Capri pointed out, like, she has no problem killing her own people and like treating them like garbage. So,
do you prefer playing as the DM or as a character, Steve? Do you have a preference?
I don't. No. So I think I like both of them for different reasons. I like playing as a player because you get to just kind of kick back and have fun and do the easy part, which is like I have one thing that I'm doing and I can take notes if I want to, but I don't have to, and I just get to enjoy it. I wish I got to do that more, but it is a thing that I very much enjoy, the player aspect of like I just get to play the game. The DM aspect I love because it is a channel for my anxiety and OCD of like I can just funnel it into a project that is essentially never ending.
It's like running algorithms in your head 24/7 when you're DMing.
Yes. And it is there are times where it's actually super helpful because like on days that we play D&D, as we're getting close to playing, like my anxiety will rise and rise and rise, and then we start playing and I go on autopilot, and once we're done and you guys leave, as soon as I shut the door, I'm like, I'm exhausted and I'm actually gonna probably sleep pretty good tonight. You
got that like anxiety worked out of your brain.
Yeah. So it is. I like DMing. I love the world building. I love the character creation, and I think one of the benefits of DMing is when you're playing a character in a game. I mean, usually, hopefully, if nobody dies, you're playing one character for this long campaign or short campaign, however you do it.
Yeah.
As a DM, I've got like a million different ideas for characters. I've got a million different things floating around, and realistically, I get to kind of create and play them as we go. Like I can, I have all sorts of NPCs where it's like, this is an idea that maybe I had for like a character of me that I didn't fully flesh out all the way, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with, and then I can put them in the game and see what happens and like run them as an NPC. So I get to play a bunch of different characters, not as in-depth as playing a game, but I still get to play a bunch of different characters and still get that in that way.
Yeah.
Look out! Fear not, ranger, barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
I would love to run a campaign for you guys at some point.
Yeah.
You know what we should do? We should publish some content at some point. We should do some like world building, like make like a little packet or something to put online.
There is some stuff that kind of like partially working on. Becky's doing a bunch of it, like world building stuff and things that it kind of fleshing out in the background that we want to try to like at some point in the future, like essentially run a game in to play test it
for the campaign that we're in right now, or like
for a different thing.
Okay, I want to ask about that in a minute. I'm so curious about that. I'll have to ask Becky about.
Yeah, that's the thing that you're going to want to talk to Becky about. That's not necessarily my place to like discuss or talk about.
If only she was here. If only we could talk to her.
So, yeah, I think that would be awesome to do. There's a lot of things that I have been thinking about in terms of publishing or like writing my own adventures and stuff. I think I'm at a point where I would probably be comfortable homebrewing or writing an adventure, just because now I know what it takes to run it, and for the most part I know what the important pieces of information are and like how to deliver it. But it's also super overwhelming to do something like that from scratch, which is why part of the reason why I like using the pre-written adventures, either pre-written one-shots or like the published adventures as a skeleton, and then building on top of that, is because at least like a third of the work is done for you.
At least you don't gotta build a skeleton. There's like 200 something parts in a human skeleton.
Yeah,
that's a lot of parts.
Yeah. But it's nice to have something already there where you can be like, okay, you've given me a starting point. I'm gonna remove all the things that I don't like, keep in all the things that I like, and the things that I'm like indifferent about. And then build on top of it and watch it become something else entirely, which is exactly what happened with ours when I sat down and I don't want to say made the mistake of, but essentially made the mistake of being like, hey, I'm going to redo the map that the game gave you. I'm going to redo it to turn it into our own custom map. And I went down the rabbit hole for months on rebuilding a map. And it's awesome now that it's done, and I'm so happy. But like, there were so many days where I was working on this map and I was just like, I fucked up. I absolutely, I fucked up making this decision.
It took you a while to do that map. You put a lot of work into it. It's a good map. It's a good map.
Well, and it was sort of I didn't realize at the time how much of redoing the map required rebuilding the history and lore of the adventure that we were going to play in that world. Where I'm just like, okay, well, I have to change this for the map, which means that I now have to change this for the adventure, which changes the thing that happens in this city. And I was just like, what have I done? Well, maybe I should just give up. But now that the map is done, I'm very happy with it. It just took way too long, and I put too much effort into a thing that it's gonna be great in the future when we've got this whole thing to play in and all these cities to go to, but realistically, in the context of the adventure that I'm running, of that whole map, only 5 cities are important.
I was gonna say there's very little chance we end up going to some of these places, but it's nice to know that it's there. There's definitely a big craft to that art form that you spent a lot of time on, and it definitely shows.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I will say also, the whole customization of pre-written campaigns has gotten a lot more seamless as it's gone along. I can't really tell at this point which stuff you made up and which stuff already existed. When we first started, we were in my uncle Glowkindle's basement, where he just had a rat dungeon in his basement, which is really funny in retrospect because he had to have built that rat dungeon for some reason. My crazy uncle just built a rat dungeon under his bar. But with campaigns like that, you could definitely tell Glowkindle was your decision. Dungeon was pre-written. I couldn't tell if you made up Cyan Wrath, or if Cyan Wrath was a part of the campaign, or if the keep was already there, how much of Sleeth you made, stuff like that.
Hell yeah. Yeah. That's what I want to hear.
That's good. It's good.
Well, and at this point, because I've gone in and I've gutted so much and changed so much, there is so much of the stuff that I've built on top of and in what's pre-written. So there's just so much of an overlap that at this point, I was hoping that it would be harder to tell the difference. At the beginning, when we was just sort of a one-shot that we were running, so Glowkindle was actually the name that was given to the person who ran the bar in the first place in the adventure. I made him your crazy New York accent uncle.
Glowkindle just seems like such a it feels very in line with the name Kickflip. I don't know. Yeah,
and it worked out that that's why I made him. It worked out that I made him your uncle, and the fact that you would. Understandably, you would go to talk to your uncle about, have you seen my dad? He's still missing. Do you have any updates? But yeah, almost all of that one I just ran as written. and was like, I don't need to explain any of this. Like, this is our first adventure. Nobody really cares about the story of like Glowkindle's bar with the weird rat dungeon underneath and a fire spider that has taken over. I just have to do it.
He probably got that installed too, honestly.
Yeah,
it sounds like a Glowkindle move.
No one's gonna ask any questions until way later, and at that point, I don't have to provide any explanations because it was supposed to be just like a one-shot.
I wonder where Glowkindle is now. I bet he died. I bet he died in the rat dungeon one day.
I mean, it's been like
6 months or something in game, right?
Yeah, it's been about 6 months since you started, so it's only you guys cleared that rat dungeon and fire spider about 6 months ago.
All right. Along the same lines, but also kind of defeating what I just suggested we do you think it's necessary to buy like the D&D books at all? How necessary do you think it is to buy like the starting kit?
So I think it depends on a couple things. Mm-hmm. If you are a new player or a new DM, I think a starter's kit is super helpful because it'll give you a basic set of rules and a basic adventure to run that kind of walks you through the important steps and builds on itself with like, okay, these are the rules for combat, these are the rules for like skill and ability checks, these are the rules for things like advantage and disadvantage, all of the important things that you're going to sort of need to generally know when you run a game, and they'll walk you through when to use them and how to kind of adjust them based on the circumstances. I think the most important book to own is the player's handbook for players and DMs, because there's a dungeon master's guide, and it's mostly geared towards like, oh, if you're homebrewing a campaign, here's just a bunch of stuff. Here's a bunch of information, here's a bunch of tables for you to roll on and generate weird environments and like enemy encounters, but most of the rules that you need to play are in the player's handbook. Outside of that, either a starter's kit and it doesn't even need to be like a Dungeons and Dragons published adventure, but like some sort of short adventure, just so that you can get an idea of how a session or how an adventure is laid out, I think are the important things. So, and if you want to keep buying adventures and running them, that's awesome, go ahead. If you decide that you're going to homebrew all sorts of stuff, that's awesome. But I feel like the thing that is most helpful is at least to have something to look at so that you have a frame of reference for like how a D&D session or adventure is built. Because if you don't have some sort of a frame of reference like that, it can be super overwhelming because, like, I mean, using sort of your home game as an example with your players, specifically your players because they're insane.
Yes, I know them well.
You built this world and you've got all these ideas in your head, but then when you tell your players you can do anything, some of them are literally going to try to do anything.
They're going to try to test those limits.
Yes.
You need to be prepared for that. If you're someone starting out like brand new, you need to be ready for that.
Yeah, or at least have something as like a starting point or a frame of reference that you can go back to and be like, oh, these things already exist, they've already been written, so I can, whatever my players do, I can work around that in the context of what I have. If you're truly from scratch or like, oh, I am building a world and my players are going to run in it and it's going to be super open-ended, like a full sandbox style campaign where you can do literally whatever you want. When your players start to do whatever they want, you're going to be like, how do I respond to that now? Because like, I had an idea in my head and they did not the thing that I had in my head, and now I have to literally build the world under their feet as they're moving.
Yeah. And that will happen a lot, by the way. There's a lot of times you're just gonna have to make it up.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna have to make it up on the spot. No amount of planning will prepare you.
But when you're just starting out or when you're new to it, it's so much easier to have a thing in front of you where most of the groundwork is already set and you just have to build out the section that your players decide, as opposed to, oh, I'm building all of it from scratch and my players are doing a thing that I was not prepared for, so I have to scrap the thing that I'm currently building and completely change directions and build out the insane thing that they want to do.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of work.
Where do you recommend people go to find pre-built like one-shots or campaigns to get them started? Do you have anywhere in particular that you go?
Yeah, there's a couple places that I go. So there's the main, the like Wizards D&D published adventures, which is actually the one that I'm using as the base for our game that I'm running now, which is it's the Tyranny of Dragons storyline. So any of the like base D&D adventure books, there's also a website where people can self-publish their own supplements and their own D&D adventures called DM's Guild. I get a lot of the one-shots that we've played leading up to this. I got a lot of it off of DM's Guild. And then there are a handful of other DMs who publish their own stuff on their own websites. And I wish I can remember. I'd have to look it up, and I'm gonna look it up right now just because their stuff is really, really good. But like our first adventure with Glowkindle in the rat basement, they published that one. Also, the same company that published that one published the adventure that we ran with the wolves in Welton.
Oh yeah. That was so long ago.
They're called Winghorn Press. Winghorn Press does a lot of great stuff. They have a lot of adventures that are really, really well done, really, really well written and well thought out, and pretty balanced because they put a lot of work into it. So Winghorn Press stuff is fantastic.
Nice. I'll make sure to link these below, by the way.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think there's a handful of others that I go to for like other supplemental stuff, but most of my adventures, if it's not a pre-written official adventure, it's usually DM's Guild or Winghorn Press.
Cool.
So,
all right. That's very useful, Steve, for people that are just trying to get into it that have not done it before.
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Do you have any closing thoughts or comments or whatever before we wrap this up?
So, like, I guess, is there anything you want me to specifically address? Like, closing comments at what? Or just, like, in general?
What's your mother's maiden name is a good one.
I'm not answering any of your security questions.
Like the 3 digits on the back of your credit card would be good. Yeah, any of those would be great.
Don't worry about it.
All right, cool. I'm gonna go get this all edited together at some point, and it'll be up. And then I'll make sure to send you royalty checks based on the millions of dollars I make off of this.
Excellent, and I appreciate you having me. Thanks. This was really cool. It was really fun.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being on, though.
Anytime.
This is something I meant to have you on for a long time, and I just kind of kept getting pushed back because we're all adults and we all have schedules to attend to and children to feed, like that one, that worm over there.
The hefty boy.
That was a hefty boy.
Eating us out of house and home.
He is, yeah. That's where most of the paychecks go, I'd imagine.
No, this has been super cool though. I like this a lot.
Well, let's do it again at some point then. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
I kind of need to go to the bathroom, honestly. All right. Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye.
That was it.
Bye.